The Iranian and Lebanese ceasefires are linked and upheld with various interpretations among those involved. A case in point is Israel's assertion that it will continue attacking Hezbollah in areas of southern Lebanon and the buffer zone where the IDF had already advanced. Putting the pieces together is Dr. Gil Murciano, CEO of the Mitvim Institute.
The current situation, I think, the cord that connects Lebanon and Iran together is a situation of very fragile and uncertain, I would say, ceasefires, with unclear rules or with some ambiguity, I would even say, the choice of each side to interpret the agreement in different ways. So in Lebanon, for example, we have a 10 days ceasefire, some would say enforced on Israel, but in order, and I'm quoting the U.S. Secretary of State's declaration, to allow the parties to discuss peace negotiation between Lebanon and Israel. The issue is that there's a couple of uncertainties about what we are facing right now. First of all, it's about this buffer zone that Israel established in the south of Lebanon. We were talking about 10 kilometers, and there's the U.S. Conditions, basically, or the conditions presented for the ceasefire, speaks about the integrity of Lebanon. You hear statements from Netanyahu that we are going to stay in this specific buffer zone, and it's going to be a permanent one. Another discussion which we are currently having is about the targeting policy. In the ceasefire agreement, it was written that Israel would avoid attacking Lebanese targets, civilian, military, and state targets. Does Hezbollah targets fall under this category? So there's still unclear aspects about it, but maybe the main issue is not so much about the legal framework or about those changes of discourse or interpretations. It's really about Hezbollah and the response to the agreement. Up until now, we've seen that this entire concept of direct negotiations between Israel and Lebanon is not just a major blow to Hezbollah, but it's also right now a main reason to go into direct conflict with the Salem Awan government in Lebanon, to the level of threats, to the level of, and of course, completely rejecting the idea of even a partial disarmament of Hezbollah.
Now, in case any of our listeners don't know, Hezbollah is part of the government, the Lebanese government.
Hezbollah right now has a somewhat of a marginal role within this new government.
But it's still a member of the government. We're negotiating with Hezbollah.
Of course, and the specific the ceasefire agreement does not state Hezbollah, and definitely not as a political movement, but it states all non-state actors, repeating the previous language about all non-state actors and all militias. And of course, we are relating to Hezbollah being dismantled, being disarmed, and the only military power effective in Lebanon will be the Lebanese army. So that's the situation right now. And one of the discussions is, how do you really engage with this major task of disarming Hezbollah? That's maybe the core of the issue.
Let me ask you. Let me put the question this way in terms of what's going to happen in 10 days. I mean, it's a 10-day ceasefire, right?
Exactly.
So what's going to be different?
So that's the entire thing, because when we discuss this idea of disarmament, these illusions, I think, what we're experiencing in the last, I would say, month or 2 months, basically, is a lot about the limitation of what you can achieve with military force alone. Really, with brute military force and nothing else. So when we speak about Lebanon in this case, all those promises about Hezbollah being disarmed or being bombed into submission, I think this is something that we can put aside at the moment. But then if you think about disarming Hezbollah as a long-term process that would take months maybe, and completely linked with the political reality and so on, then you're discussing something completely different, something that would take much more commitment. So you can look at this ceasefire as a basis to an agreement that would start a dynamic. Question is whether or not the current government and Hezbollah would be even willing to allow the space in order to those things to actually develop. Some of those things relates to things that are not connected to the military aspect. For example, an international mechanism to reconstruct Lebanon. The decision who's going to be rebuilding the south part of Lebanon has more influence, in my mind, on the future security of the citizens of Israel living in the north than the exact size or the exact length of the so-called buffer zone in the south part of Lebanon. So a lot of it is not about the military. It's about shifting to another arena on the political, on the reconstruction, on the international level.
And the Lebanon-Iran link is, among other things, of course, the fact that it's U.S. President Trump who is calling the shots, who's coordinating in whatever way he is doing it. What do you think about the way that he imposes on Prime Minister Netanyahu, stop attacking in Lebanon or whatever, or that, he posted on social media. We know that Trump does this all the time, but before the security cabinet ministers even had a chance to meet and discuss it themselves, it was already being announced. The ceasefire was being announced by the president. Is he having a positive effect on the overall situation, President Trump?
So I would say that I'm a little bit ambivalent about it, because on the one hand, when you speak about the actual effect, especially in pushing the Israeli government to negotiate with the Salem Marwan government, we've been preaching for that for the last 3 weeks, not just as a major blow to Hezbollah. You mentioned the linkage between Iran and Lebanon. What it's about controlling the narrative of the ceasefire, because Iran is very interested to present this ceasefire as a proof to its commitment to Hezbollah. That they are the one that caused it. And by conducting this negotiation, you can control the narrative, saying, no, we're taking things to our own, we're taking control of those matters, and we are defining the conditions of such agreement. However, on the other hand, I think that we are facing a nadir in the autonomy of decision-making in Israel on decisions that are directly related to the security of the state of Israel and its citizens for years to come. I think Israel has never been, I can't remember a situation where Israel was involved in a war that would define the future of its, the future security and resilience of the country, and had so little effect over the decisions relating to the timing of the ceasefire, the conditions and so on. You can look at Israel, I think it really substantiates its role as a military superpower that has absolutely nothing to offer on the political level, or even willingness to offer any vision or a political idea, and therefore, it is treated as a demolition constructor that after the actual destruction, nobody cares to even consult with them about how the new building or how the new order is going to be developed. And part of it is because of Trump's way, and you're right about that, but part of it is also about the lack or the inability of the Israeli government to offer any initiative on these specific issues, being pushed into negotiation instead of initiating and shaping those conditions.
So let's do the math. The math is that the ceasefire went into effect Thursday night into Friday in Lebanon for 10 days, okay? But at the same time, we had a 2-week ceasefire announced. 2-week ceasefire announced regarding Iran, and that expires Tuesday night, Wednesday, whatever.
22nd of April.
Yeah, okay.
Three days from now.
Yeah, whoever's time zone you're talking about. Well, yeah, it was Tuesday night, Wednesday, whatever, that kind of thing. So 2 weeks later, which is like in just a couple of days. What's going to happen? I'm not asking you to predict, but are the Iranians just dragging us along?
Well, the question is, who are the Iranians? Because if you judge the events of the last weekend, I don't know if you can speak about a monolithic decision-making structure in Iran right now. There's obviously a very strong pull by the IRGC, but then when we speak about decisions such as opening the Hormuz Straits, removing the blockade, you can see that there's already differing views. And you almost see through the actions of Iran, it almost reflects on what's going on the disagreements, the rift, I would even say, within their own decision-making structure. But look, there's two major issues on the table. One is obviously the Hormuz Straits, and we for our listeners, we're talking about the blockade within a blockade, right? A blockade that Iran put on the Hormuz Straits at the beginning of the war, and then a blockade placed by the U.S. On Iranian harbors, trying to turn the Iranian blockade to some kind of a double-edged sword, right, to increase the pressure, economic pressure over Iran. Now, the issue is that the U.S. government specifically stated that they would not remove the blockade until an agreement is reached. And therefore, the Iranian actions right now, they are claiming that they wanted to remove the blockade, but the Americans were not removing it. To make things simple, in the end, there's going to be a certain decision about how the removal of that blockade is connected with certain economic steps that Iran demands, including sanctions relief, including some guarantees about not being attacked again. So this is one arena. The second arena, of course, is a nuclear issue. And very shortly, it's about two things. It's about the fate of those famous 400, actually it's about 600 kilos of relatively highly enriched uranium. And it's about the future of enrichment on Iranian soil, yes or not, whether or not they're going to be enrichment and what kind of oversight. And currently the situation is such as that I think that on the nuclear issue, you do see a certain overlap. There is some flexibility that allows you to reach some kind of a formula probably with a great oversight on Iranians' development of centrifuges and the nuclear trigger and issues as such. But there's a major question here at the end of where does the line passes within Iranian decision makers, and specifically with the IRGC, and what kind of compromise can Trump actually reach? I'm just going to say one thing about it. When you compare where we were in Oman before the war and where we are right now on the nuclear issue, we haven't moved an inch. The same positions that were presented on that, the eve of the war and right now are basically about the same. We haven't seen any drastic change on that level. It was the same topics.
Right.
And one topic that is not on the table, and when we talked about Israeli ability to shape the conditions or inability to do so, is the issue of missiles, which we all experience directly.
Right.
And this issue is off the table, pretty much off the table. We still have to see how it's going to turn out.
Dr. Gil Murciano, CEO of the Mitvim Institute.